Here's a WhatsApp question. Mike will be pleased with you, Leon in Wakefield, because it's about Angela Rayner. The question is the story about Angela Rayner merely the Tories and the right-wing press, that's you, Harriet, trying to smear her? Well, this is a story that is being kept going by the Daily Mail, it has to be said. Is it all a smear?
No, I think there are some really quite legitimate questions that Angela Rayner needs to answer. The central charge is one of alleged hypocrisy. She bought her council house under the Margaret Thatcher's Right to Buy scheme and benefited from that and held on to it, so she didn't have to repay any of the money which she would have had to do if she sold it fairly soon after buying it. She's then criticised that Right to Buy scheme, questions about what Labour's going to do in government over council homes. And then secondly, some questions about her tax affairs in regard to that, which is a really murky area of tax law. And she hasn't really explained exactly why, in her view, she didn't break any rules. And so until I think she comes up and says exactly why, then these questions are going to be kept being asked.
But the fact is that the case for the prosecution hasn't been made either. There's a lot of innuendo, there's a lot of suspicion, but you haven't discovered the smoking gun yet, have you?
But that's incredibly, if not impossible to do, because tax affairs are personal, they're not published. So there's no way that we know if taxes were paid or exactly kind of what her situation was. But there are a lot of questions which remain unanswered. And while she denies any claims that she has done any wrongdoing, she hasn't explained exactly why that is the case. And you've got tax experts coming out saying these things don't quite stack up, and no answers.
Mike?
Well, I'm not really. I mean, it has to be said. I think I would agree with the way that you framed it, Iain. You know, it does feel a little getting a little desperate now, and the response, the kind of the big reveal that we saw over the weekend in the Mail was simply some posts of her referring to somewhere where she spent some of her time as being in I think what's now called a blended family as a home. It wasn't quite, as you say, a smoking gun. There has been a lot of innuendo. There has been a lot of kind of there has been a smoking gun.
But if you call on Tory cabinet ministers to publish their tax returns and then you fail to be very clear with your own tax situation, I mean, that's not a good place to be for any politician, is it?
But I would say at the same time, this is of a scale and it's of a complexity. And yes, these things are complex, but it's of a complexity that I think is the Conservatives are desperately trying to put some fire in this engine, and it isn't really taking part. People certainly not come up on the doorstep when I've been out canvassing. People are noticing, I've got to say, the multi-million scandals that are affecting the Conservative Party and their donors, and some of the lobbying scandals that both previous and indeed current members of the government have been involved in. But, this, I think, feels like fairly small fry. And I'm sure that the Conservatives, I don't want to malign Harriet's esteemed publication, but those papers and those in a similar stable, I'm sure they'll keep pushing this. And I also think I smell a sniff of it being a little bit about a strong, vocal northern woman standing up for herself, and that puts some people's noses out.
Scarlett?
I mean, the Tories are after a scalp, aren't they? This is what they're desperate for. I mean, when the Daily Mail has, the chair of the Conservative Party is advising Keir Starmer to get rid of her, you think, oh my God, this is crazy. I mean, actually, nothing's been found with Nahal Zahawi. Nadim Zahawi. We knew that there were problems. We knew that the HMRC were doing things. HMRC are doing nothing at the moment. I mean, it just seems we're trying to make an awful lot of fuss about a tiny. I mean, at the most, we're talking £1,500, and she says that she and HMRC are fine. HMRC are not prosecuting. There's nothing to do. It's just desperation. Well, the police are looking into it now because they've been pushed. They have to, don't they? But I mean, it's really for HMRC, not the police.
Do you buy Mike's argument? There's a bit of misogyny here.
No, I mean, I think it's just politics. I think the Tories are completely desperate.
Most Tory MPs that I know love Angela Rayner, and they wouldn't actually want to see. They actually rather like her. because she's good fun.
Well,
she mixes with them. And
she's a breath of fresh air, isn't she? She's great. I mean, it's not just Tory MPs who like her. I mean, the country likes her. She said
even though she did call them scum, as she said. But,
I know, but
anyway, let's
we're
hear
all
from
allowed
David.
to be rude.
If you look at the tax issue, it is quite complex. As Scarlett says, we're talking about really quite small sums of money. And it is perfectly possible that Angela Rayner made a mistake at the time and didn't quite get it right. It's also perfectly possible that, in fact, there's an explanation as to why she didn't pay any CGT. But I think the question isn't so much about did she get her tax wrong, did she get the tax right. If she got it wrong, it's a sort of error that people make, and it happens, and it's not a big deal, and move on. But the question came up, and she is deputy leader of the Labour Party. She is, destined to be, one would assume at the moment, a very senior figure in government. And she gave an explanation that was that looks as if it's got some flaws in it. There may be an explanation as why no tax was due, but from the outside, I can absolutely see why tax experts are saying, well, the explanation doesn't really stack up. And if she can clarify it, then the story moves on. If she can't clarify it, this isn't about Angela Rayner of 10 years ago getting something wrong with her tax. It's about Angela Rayner today giving an explanation which is untrue. And I think it's perfectly legitimate for political opponents and for the media to probe that. And so, as Scarlett says, this is politics, but, Keir Starmer has rightly drawn attention to failings in ethical standards by this government, and particularly by Boris Johnson's government. He has held a sort of very high bar. He has said that his government is going to be, very clean. I think it's perfectly legitimate to ask questions as to whether the explanation Angela Rayner gave was correct and true. And it may be. We don't know, but I think it's worth asking the question.
I think if she'd said at the beginning, look, if there was tax to be paid, I wasn't aware of the tax system at the time. It wasn't sort of something that I would have known anything about. I think that would have almost shut it down completely. But she didn't say that, did she?
She didn't. And look, capital gains tax is quite complicated. And if you've got a married couple, each with their own property, they're actually treated differently. In a way, they're treated worse than if they were not married. People could easily assume, well, I don't have to pay CGT on my primary residence, and my husband's got a different principal residence, and we're all fine. Only then to subsequently find that it's gone wrong. And if she'd said that, I would be absolutely one of the first to say, oh, come on, back off here. This is a sort of mistake that anyone could make.
Okay.
Can I just jump in there on David's point? There's also an issue of potential electoral fraud if she was registered at the wrong house, and she potentially by the end of this year could well be in charge of the Cabinet Office if she becomes Deputy Prime Minister. And I think the other point is she is really well respected for being a really straight-talking...
So why would there be an electoral issue? Because you can be on the electoral roll in two different places.
I think if you're in primary residence, we think she was in one place and actually said she was living or was effectively living in another. So there's a murkiness around that, which is something she could clear up.
I'm on the electoral roll in Kent and in Norfolk because I have a property in each, but it doesn't matter what your primary residence is. You can still vote in either or in local elections in both.
But we don't know if she was registered in both, and I think as far as I'm aware, she was only registered in one, as far as we understand. Right. So that's an issue that she needs to clear up. But she's, as I was saying, is a really popular politician for being straight talking. And why on this issue is she struggling to, cat's got her tongue?
Well, she's very welcome to come on this programme and explain all.